And then Jesus comes to a tree, a fig tree. If you read this with me in verse number 12, on the following day, the next day, when they came from Bethany, he was hungry, and seeing in the distance a fig tree and leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard of it. Today we want to look at two things that promise, that have an expectation of fruitfulness, but they're not. There's perhaps nothing more frustrating than expecting something from something and receiving nothing from it at all. And so here Christ is. He's heard the cries. He's heard the crowd. Then he pulls his disciples, he takes his disciples aside and they walk with him. And in their walking with him, he takes them to this fig tree. The fig tree comes with a certain expectation of figs. You would expect that on a fig tree, you would get figs. Now, the scripture tells us very interestingly here that this was not the season for the fig tree to even have figs. Very, very curious what Christ is doing here. But he's bringing them to this tree. He's hungry. He comes to the tree expecting to get something from the tree. And seeing the tree in a distance, he goes up to the tree, but he couldn't find anything on it because it wasn't the season for figs. And so Christ says, now later it said that this was a curse, but he declares, he speaks with authority to this tree, and he says, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples hear what he is saying, and their question is, why? Why is it that he comes to a tree that has no expectation of figs at this time? Why is it that he's coming to this tree expecting it to have something that it's not yet ready to have? All throughout the Old Testament, figs are known to be a representation of Israel. In your notes, in your sermon notes, I've listed out some of those passages of scripture that you can go and look up this week, and you'll see that there are several times throughout the Old Testament that figs are related to the children of God. There's also several times in Hosea and Joel that it talks about these figs having to be dealt with because of their disobedience. So this is a common illustration that he's using this morning when he talks about these figs. It should bring to their mind, should bring to their understanding that he's talking about a relationship with him. And he's expecting that those who have a relationship with Christ, those who are in a relationship with Christ, there ought to be some fruitfulness. That we can't just be fig trees out of season, fig trees that are not bearing anything for him or from him. Instead, there ought to be some fruitfulness that's coming from our tree. If we look at our lives, are we bearing fruit for Christ?